Hello and good evening. You're watching AWANITonight with me, Soraya Mia. Police believed only one individual was involved in the murder of 6-year-old autistic boy Zayn Rayyan Abdul Matin. Selangor Police Chief Dato' Hussein Omar Han said the finding was based on the leads, strangulation marks, and signs of struggle found on the boy's body.
Zayn Rayyan was reported missing last Tuesday, and his body was found the following day in a stream about 200 meters from the block he lived in at apartment Idaman in Damansara Damai, Petaling Jaya. As the body was found at night, Hussein said it is possible that the murderer disposed of the body in the evening when it was raining heavily after cops had searched the spot earlier that morning. Hussein said police are still scrutinizing the dash cam recordings obtained from several apartment residents. He added that police investigation is also focusing on a storage area located 50 meters from the victim's residence to identify individuals frequently present in that location who may be suspects in the case.
The much speculated cabinet reshuffle is expected to take place on Tuesday. According to highly placed sources, several ministries will be affected, seeing the possible return of several senior MPs who previously served as ministers, while a few others may make their debut as ministers. It is understood that new ministers will be informed of a rehearsal taking place at Istana Negara on Tuesday. A palace official said an official announcement will be made before the swearing-in at 3 p.m. The reshuffle comes a year after the unity government, headed by Prime Minister Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim, came into power. Meanwhile, Tan Sri Dr. Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar reminded cabinet members to respect the parliamentary institution by attending question and answer sessions for their respective ministries. The Dewan Negara President said as the upper house of parliament, the Senate's sanctity must be respected, and the minister's presence is important to clarify matters raised by senators.
Saya memperingatkanlah, tolonglah menteri datang. Kalau yang amat berhormat Perdana Menteri boleh datang, yang amat berhormat Timbalan Perdana Menteri boleh datang. Takkan menteri memikirkan tempat ni rendah sangat untuk menteri datang. Ini di upper house of parliament, Yang Berhormat.
Wan Junaidi's response follows a supplementary question by Senator Ami Ghazali, who wanted some clarification on the position of Tourism, Arts and Culture Minister Dato' Sri Tiong King Sing, whom he claimed had not attended question and answer proceedings in the last 8 months. The issue of absentees among MPs was also highlighted by the Dewan Rakyat Speaker Tan Sri Johari Abdul last month, with him suggesting for names of MPs found to be absent for parliamentary sittings deliberately to be displayed on the Dewan Rakyat website.
On to other news, the overall rate of progress of the East Coast Rail Link ECRL project has reached over 56% as of November. According to Transport Minister Anthony Loke, the progress is in line with the project's completion schedule of December 2026, and it is scheduled to be operational by January 2027.
The Yang di-Pertuan Agong Al-Sultan Abdullah Rayatuddin Al-Mustafa Billah Shah officiated the installation of the first track of the ECRL in Gebeng, Kuantan earlier today. The installation of the 94-kilometre track from the Kuantan Port City Station in Gebeng to Dungun Terengganu is expected to take about 3 to 4 months to be completed. The next track installation will involve the stretch from Kuantan Port City Station to Temerloh, before heading northwards from Dungun to Kota Baru, then the final stretch from Temerloh to Jalan Kastam, Selangor. ECRL involves a 665-kilometre railway line across Kelantan, Terengganu, Pahang and Selangor with 20 stations, 10 passenger stations and 10 combined passenger and cargo stations. Once the project is completed, Loke said the rail service will greatly benefit those in the East Coast, enabling, for example, residents of Kuantan to arrive in Kuala Lumpur in just 1.5 hours compared to 3 hours by road.
Meanwhile, Loke said the contract value of local companies' involvement in the ECRL project has reached 12.99 billion ringgit. surpassing the set target of 10.8 billion ringgit. As for the involvement of Bumiputra companies, 74% of 3.5 billion ringgit target for ECRL civil works had been given to Bumiputra contractors, consultants and suppliers.
Pihak MRL dan CCCC akan menggembling tenaga memastikan nilai kontrak melibatkan syarikat Bumiputra akan terus meningkat sehingga tamat proses pembinaan ECRL. Antara inisiatif yang sedang diambil adalah kerjasama dengan pihak kerajaan-kerajaan negeri yang terlibat bagi meneliti syarikat kontraktor Bumiputra dari kategori G1 dan G2. Seterusnya membuka peluang kepada mereka untuk bersama-sama membangunkan projek ECRL di dalam skop kerja yang bersesuaian. Pihak MRL dan CCCC sedang di dalam proses menyenarai pendek syarikat-syarikat berkenaan bagi tujuan tersebut.
We'll go for a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Israel bombed southern Gaza's Khan Yunis on Monday as a single-day death toll in Gaza hits 300. Palestinian activists and grassroots organizations have called for a global strike today to demand an immediate ceasefire. The movement called on the international community to unite in sending a message of solidarity with the nearly 18,000 people killed in Gaza since 7th October. Meanwhile, the 193-member United Nations General Assembly is set to vote on Tuesday on a draft resolution demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Last Friday, the U.S. vetoed a UN Security Council resolution calling for a similar ceasefire, while the UK abstained. Hamas on Sunday said Israel would not receive their prisoners alive without an exchange and negotiation and meeting demands of the resistance. Israel says some 137 hostages are still in Gaza, while activists say some 7,000 Palestinians are in Israeli jails. The United Nations said that it needed $46.4 billion next year to bring life-saving help to around 180 million people in desperate circumstances around the world. The international institution warns that the global humanitarian outlook for 2024 was bleak, with conflicts, climate emergencies, and collapsing economies wreaking havoc on the most vulnerable.
So I think the Middle East as a whole, adding Gaza and West Bank in, is probably going to be the area of greatest need. But Ukraine is going through a desperate winter and a war that will restart in full swing next year, and it will need a lot of attention.
While global attention focuses on the conflict raging in the Gaza Strip, the UN said the wider Middle East, Sudan and Afghanistan were among the hotspots that also needed major international aid operations. But the size of the annual appeal and the number of people it aims to reach was scaled back compared to 2023, following a decrease in donations. In 2023, the UN received just over one-third of the $57 billion required in 2023, one of the worst funding shortfall in years. It allowed UN agencies to deliver assistance and protection to 128 million people. The UN therefore scaled down its appeal to $46.4 billion this time around and will focus on those in the gravest need.
Australia announced that it would tighten visa rules for international students and low-skilled workers that could have its migrant intake over the next 2 years. Under the new policies, international students would need to secure higher ratings on English tests, and there would be more scrutiny on a student's second visa application that would prolong their stay.
The decision comes as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the country's migration system is broken and the numbers needed to be wound back to a sustainable level. Australia boosted its annual migration numbers last year to help businesses recruit staff to fill shortages after the COVID-19 pandemic. But the sudden influx of foreign workers and students has put pressure on an already tight housing market and increased homelessness in the country. Australia's net migration is expected to peak at a record 510,000 in 2022 to 2023, driven largely by international students. It aims to slash the annual intake to 250,000 by June 2025. The government is also promising to crack down on unscrupulous education providers who offer cheap, low-quality courses but access to work visas.
Meanwhile, TikTok will invest $1.5 billion in Indonesia's Gotoh Group in a deal that would allow it to restart its shopping app in its biggest online retail market. Under the deal, the social media giant will combine its Indonesian TikTok shop business with Gotoh's e-commerce unit Tokopedia. TikTok will have a controlling stake in that entity.
The deal is unusual for Chinese firm ByteDance to take over a prominent local online commerce player, but it may help solve the problem of Indonesia's surprise ban on social media shopping. In October, the Indonesian government ordered TikTok to shut down its online shop in a move seen as protecting local operators, including its smaller businesses. Indonesia's e-commerce market is dominated by platforms such as Tokopedia, Shopee, and Lazada, but TikTok Shop has gained significant market share since its launch in 2021. Indonesia is TikTok's second largest global market after the United States, with 125 million users.
Governments can mitigate climate change by implementing policies to ensure fossil fuel producers pay for the carbon dioxide they release into the atmosphere. This can be achieved through technologies like carbon capture and storage, also known as carbon clear-up. Oxford Professor of Geoscience, Dr. Miles Allen, says this is a relatively affordable way of stopping fossil fuels from causing global warming to deteriorate further.
So this technology exists, but of course it costs money. It's much cheaper to dump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, where it becomes everybody's problem, than it is to capture carbon dioxide and dispose of it responsibly. Think of it like rubbish. It's cheaper and easier to throw your rubbish in the street, but it's bad for everybody if you do that. So we need to think of carbon dioxide in the same way. We are making this rubbish, this waste from using fossil fuels. We need, instead of throwing it away into the atmosphere, we need to dispose of it responsibly. And that's the principle which we advocate in this paper.
Speaking at COP28 in Dubai, Dr. Allen stressed that phasing out fossil fuels by implementing the extended producer responsibility will not kill the industry as a whole or spikes up the prices of fossil fuels overnight.
You don't need to go to 100% capture and disposal on day one. We need to get there by 2050. And if you have to capture 100% of the carbon dioxide associated with fossil fuels, then it starts to get quite expensive. But we need to get to 10 by the early 2030s. Now, 10%, these companies could probably do with their own emissions, with their own, and they could do it relatively cheaply. It would have a relatively small impact. The impact on price eventually would be significant, but it doesn't, for 20 years, you'd barely notice it. And that's, an important point, because then people don't, what is unfair on people is if you tell them tomorrow petrol is going to cost 3 times as much. That's when people, object and say, no, I can't deal with that. But if you tell people, okay, in 25 years' time, petrol will cost twice as much as it does today. Now, that's sort of more or less the difference. And in that situation, people say, okay, maybe I'll get a smaller car. Maybe I'll get a smaller car in 10 years' time. Maybe I'll switch to an electric car in 10 years' time. They can plan. And that makes it fairer, because then people are empowered to do whatever they feel is right for them and for their families.
That wraps up AWANI Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Soraya Mia, and we'll see you soon.